Hello all and welcome to another Winged Review. Now, a little while ago I did a video for people mentioned in the game ShadowMan, one of which was Jeffrey Dahmer, who remains one of the most notorious serial killers in American history. When I was researching what he did for the video, it was absolutely horrendous. He murdered 17 people, I think it was, between the late 70s and early 90s, but it was cannibalism, necrophilia, dissection, preservation of body parts. He melted them in acid solution, the body parts he didn't want to keep, and there's more to it than that, but it was horrendous and it just got worse and worse the more I researched into it. When I found out that there were several films made about Jeffrey Dahmer, I wanted to give one a watch just to see what the film was like and see if there's any more information, all that sort of thing. I will put a link up in a minute to the Jeffrey Dahmer section of my video in a minute, so I'll mention that later on. And I ended up, because there were several, I didn't really want to watch all of them, but I went for the 2002 film Dahmer starring Jeremy Renner. And I like Jeremy Renner, he's a decent enough actor. The reviews for the film were alright, nothing special, but they seemed decent enough. But what mainly clinched it was that apparently Jeremy was given the role in Hurt Locker because of his portrayal of Jeffrey Dahmer in this film. So I thought, give it a go, mentioned it to my flatmate. He'd never heard of Jeffrey Dahmer before I said to him about watching this film, so he knew nothing until we watched the film. And considering what had gone on, it was a massive disappointment when the film was an absolute pile of wank. It was awful, it was dull, it was just, nothing really happened, and considering the subject matter, it just missed out so much stuff. As I mentioned, James didn't know anything about Jeffrey Dahmer until I mentioned this film, so everything he knew about Jeffrey Dahmer, he would have gotten from this film. At the end of the film, he said that all he knew about Jeffrey Dahmer was that he murdered 2 or 3 people and drugged and raped a load of blokes in a nightclub. That was it. And considering what Jeffrey Dahmer actually did, that just goes to show how much was missed out in this film. There was a scene towards the beginning where he drilled a hole in one of the guy's heads, which he did do. That is something Jeffrey did to someone, but it didn't explain why he did it, his reasons, or anything like that. It was just a case of he did it, and that was it. And there were some, it did say at the start of the film that parts were made up for the film, which it's an adaptation, it's fair enough, but with how much stuff Jeffrey actually did, and with what was focused on in this film, it just didn't work. It did flick between different time periods, and Jeremy did play him for all time frames. He was made up to look a bit younger for the younger period, but he still didn't look as young as he needed to be, so it probably would have been better to get another actor in, but what the hell anyway. But it seems though it was building up each of the time frames so that there would, at the end of the film, all of the time frames would then culminate into like butcherism or something like that. But it didn't. There was just nothing. I think yes, a couple of people did get killed. There were a few nasty scenes, but for the most part, it was just nothing. Talking, random going places, and just meeting people, and essentially just setting things up for the big finale that never happened. I'm not saying the film should have been like Saw or torture porn or anything like that, but it's just considering what Jeffrey actually did to his victims, it was horrendous, and it just wasn't mentioned or hinted at all. There was one scene where he had a box wrapped in cling film or something, as a severed head in a box, which that was as far as it went in any sort of preservation of body parts, and yet when they actually searched his flat when he was originally caught, they found skeletons, genitals had been cut off, hands, torsos, organs in the freezer, and so much stuff, and yet all we got in this film was one head. And again, I'm not saying it should have been really graphically gore, but it just completely missed the point of what Jeffrey was about. I could have written a better script for a film than what this film did. And although I mentioned before about James, all he knew about Jeffrey from the film was 2 or 3 victims and some rapage, I showed him a small section of the video I did on Jeffrey Dahmer, and he said that he learned more about Jeffrey in the 30-second clip, which the bit I did of Jeffrey in my video is about 4 or 5 minutes. I showed him 30 seconds, minute of that, and he said he learned more about Jeffrey in that small amount of time than he did in the entire film. So that just goes to show how crap the film was, really. And I mean, yes, Jeremy did a good role as Jeffrey. He did play the part very well, but there was so much stuff that Jeffrey actually did that was just glazed over, not mentioned, that it failed as a film because it was dull and there was just too much talking and not just anything going on. Most of it was just him talking to his would-be victims. So, but even if it was just a made-up storyline and everything, it was a dull, boring film that I would not recommend. But for people who find out about Jeffrey and want to know about him, because if all they hear is Jeffrey Dahmer is a horrendous person who did this, that, and that, and then they decide they want to watch this film for more information, they're just going to think, oh, is that all he did? No, it's not that bad. So it just doesn't do him... It's almost an insult to the families of the people who Jeffrey did actually kill, really, because they just glazed over most of it. So I'm probably repeating myself now, but it was just an awful film. It was really dull. We were happy when it's over. It failed as a film, and it failed as information about Jeffrey Dahmer. So don't watch it. Hopefully one of the other ones will be better, but the film sucked. See you next time.